He managed billions of dollars, operated on Wall Street for 48 years, and never made a single real investment. Then, he destroyed entire pensions, drove investors to suicide, and died in prison at the age of 82. This is the story of Bernie Madoff, the man who weaponized trust and built the largest Ponzi scheme in history. And the most insane part? The SEC investigated him 8 times and found nothing. Queens, New York, 1938. A middle-class neighborhood where dreams were modest and ambition had a ceiling. But one child, Bernie Madoff, had no interest in ceilings. By age 13, he was selling lawn sprinklers. By 22, he worked as a lifeguard and sprinkler installer. Most young men would have saved for college. Bernie? He saved every penny and borrowed another $50,000 from his father-in-law. In 1960, with $5,000 in his pocket and a dream bigger than Manhattan, he founded Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. Not on Wall Street. In a tiny office. No connections. No pedigree. Just hunger. Bernie started by trading penny stocks through the pink sheets. Cheap stocks no one wanted to touch. It was the Wall Street underworld. But he saw something others ignored: technology. While the elite traded on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, Bernie invested in computers. Electronic systems that could process orders faster than any human broker. He developed technology that would later become NASDAQ. That's right. The man who would execute the biggest fraud in history helped create one of the world's largest stock markets. By the 80s, his firm traded 5% of all NYSE volume. He became chairman of the NASDAQ. He sat on the board of financial industry regulation. He was respected, admired, envied. But there was another side. A side no one saw. On the 17th floor of the Lipstick Building in Manhattan, away from the legitimate trading floor, Bernie operated something different. Fewer than 24 employees. No online access for clients. Statements sent by mail. And returns that defied financial physics. He had discovered something powerful. Trust is worth more than performance. And on Wall Street, appearances are everything. The predator had found his hunting ground. Bernie didn't sell stocks. He sold exclusivity. His investment fund didn't accept just anyone. You needed an introduction. It was like joining a secret billionaires club. And the returns? Absurd. 10 to 12% a year. Every year. Without fail. Without volatility. While the market went up and down like a roller coaster, Madoff's clients watched their accounts grow in a perfect straight line, climbing at 45 degrees. It was impossible. Mathematically impossible. But no one questioned it. He called his strategy split strike conversion. It sounded sophisticated, solid, conservative. But it was all a lie. Bernie didn't buy stocks. He didn't trade options. He didn't invest in anything. He simply took the investor's money and deposited it into an account at Chase Manhattan Bank. When someone wanted to withdraw, he paid them with the money from new investors. It was a classic Ponzi scheme, but executed with a perfection the world had never seen. His secret weapon? Affinity fraud. He targeted the Jewish community. He was one of them. Jewish. Philanthropist. Respected. And Jews trusted Jews. To doubt Bernie Madoff? No. You doubt God, one investor said years later. Jewish foundations, synagogues, nonprofit organizations, all placed millions with Bernie. And he destroyed them. But it wasn't just Jews. Swiss banks. European funds. And the most brilliant part? He made it difficult to invest with him. If you asked too many questions, he'd turn you away. External audit? A matter of secrecy, he'd say. He turned obstacles into attractions. The more secretive, the more exclusive it seemed. By 2008, he managed $65 billion from 4,800 clients around the world. But he didn't have a penny invested. Everything was in a checking account. Just numbers on fake statements. Fictitious profits. A house of cards built on promises and charm. Bernie wasn't working alone. To maintain a fraud of this scale, he needed accomplices. Or at least, people who would ask the right questions but accept the wrong answers. Frank D. Pascali, his director of operations. David Freeling, his auditor. A two-person accounting firm in Rockland County that audited billions. And there were the feeder funds. Companies that channeled money to Madoff, receiving fat commissions. They didn't do real due diligence. But that was part of the bait. You won't audit me. You either trust me, or you leave. And they stayed. Because the returns were too good to question. The empire grew through generations. And the most insane thing? Bernie was being investigated. Repeatedly. In 1999, a financial analyst named Harry Markopolos smelled a rat. He tried to replicate Madoff's returns. Impossible. He wrote a memo. The world's largest hedge fund is a fraud. He sent it to the SEC. 5 times. Over 9 years. Nothing happened. In 2005, the SEC conducted a full investigation and concluded no evidence of fraud. How was this possible? Connections. Bernie's niece, Shauna Madoff, married Eric Swanson, a former assistant director at the SEC who had investigated her uncle. Bernie had friends in high places. He donated to politicians. He was the warden watching himself. And for 48 years, he escaped unscathed. At his peak, Bernie Madoff was untouchable. Billionaires begged to invest with him. Swiss banks deposited fortunes in his hands. Foundations entrusted entire pensions to his care. He owned a Palm Beach mansion, a Manhattan penthouse, a villa on the French Riviera, an 80-foot yacht, all bought with stolen money. But no one knew. At his parties, Bernie was the perfect host. Humble, modest, reliable. And all the while, the empire was rotting from within. Because the math of a Ponzi is brutal. You need new money to pay old money. And in 2008, the financial crisis hit. Lehman Brothers failed. Investors panicked. And they went straight to Bernie. Because they thought their Madoff accounts were liquid cash. Safe. By November, redemption requests hit $7 billion. But Bernie only had $300 million in cash. He tried desperately to raise money. It wasn't enough. By December, the Chase account had only $234 million. Bernie knew it was over. On December 10th, he called his sons, Mark and Andrew. They worked in the legitimate part of the firm. He looked at them and said, "It's all over. The asset management business is one big lie. It's basically a giant Ponzi scheme." Mark and Andrew were in shock. They called a lawyer, and the lawyer called the FBI. The next morning, December 11th, 2008, FBI agents knocked on Bernie's door. Special Agent Theodore Cassioppi calmly asked if there was an innocent explanation. Bernie Madoff paused and replied, "There is no innocent explanation. He was arrested, handcuffed." The news exploded like a nuclear bomb on Wall Street. $65 billion. Gone. For 1,800 investors. Destroyed. Some victims lost everything. Holocaust survivor and Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel lost millions from his foundation. Kevin Bacon and Kyra Sedgwick lost most of their savings. And the victims weren't just the wealthy. There were retirees. Teachers. One investor said, "I feel violated. He stole my dignity, my security, my future." Another investor committed suicide. And then came the darkest tragedy of all. Mark Madoff, Bernie's son, never recovered from the shame. 2 years after his father's arrest, Mark was found hanged in his Soho apartment. Andrew Madoff, the other son, developed cancer. He died in 2014 at 48. He blamed the stress of the scandal for his illness. Bernie Madoff was charged with 11 federal crimes. On March 12, 2009, Bernie pleaded guilty to all charges. In court, he read his allocution. "I am deeply remorseful and saddened at the pain I have caused. When I began the Ponzi scheme, I believed it would end quickly and I could extricate myself and my clients. It was too late for remorse." On June 29, 2009, Judge Denny Chin delivered the sentence. 150 years in prison. The maximum sentence permitted. The room erupted. Victims cheered. Others cried. And the accomplices? They also fell. Frank D. Pascali, Bernie's right-hand man, confessed to 10 crimes but died of cancer. Peter Madoff, Bernie's brother, was sentenced to 10 years. But the real work began for Irving Picard, the court-appointed trustee tasked with recovering assets. He sued hundreds of investors, not because they were guilty, but because they had withdrawn more than they invested. Fictitious profits that needed to be returned to pay the real victims. He has recovered $14.5 billion to date, but that is only 22% of the $65 billion lost. In prison, Bernie became a celebrity. Prisoners sought him out for financial advice. He tried to portray himself as a victim. Ruth Madoff, his wife, lost everything. Her mansion, her cars, her jewelry. She lives alone, shunned by the society that once adored her. And Bernie? He died on April 14, 2021, at 82, in prison. He never expressed genuine remorse. But the story of Bernie Madoff didn't end with his death. It turned into something more disturbing: entertainment. Books were written, films and documentaries were produced, and the public devoured it. Because deep down, we're fascinated by villains who get away with it for so long. But what about the victims? Norma Hill, 78, lost her life savings. She had to go back to work as a secretary. Hadassah, the Jewish charity, lost 90 million. Healthcare programs were canceled. The Elie Wiesel Foundation for Humanity closed. 15 million lost. And the indirect victims? Thousands of ordinary people who trusted legitimate managers who secretly channeled money to Bernie. To this day, lawsuits continue. JP Morgan Chase paid $2.6 billion. HSBC paid $62.5 million. But it will never be enough. Because $65 billion is not just a number. It is 37 charitable foundations destroyed, 13,000 direct victims identified, 3 documented suicides, thousands of ruined retirements. So why did Bernie Madoff succeed for so long? Because he didn't sell investments. He sold trust. Because the SEC failed. 8 investigations. No results. Regulators incompetent, overwhelmed, or corrupted by connections. Because Wall Street didn't want to see. No one blew the whistle. Because Bernie was powerful. And on Wall Street, power protects power. And because we, as a society, revere wealth without questioning its source. Bernie Madoff didn't hack the financial system. He understood it perfectly. He understood that exclusivity creates desire, that secrecy looks like sophistication, and that closed communities protect their members until they discover they've been betrayed. He turned 48 years on Wall Street into a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. And perhaps the most terrifying lesson? He almost got away with it. If the 2008 crisis hadn't happened, he could have kept going. Harry Markopolos, the man who desperately tried to warn the world, said, "Bernie didn't invent the Ponzi scheme, but he perfected it. And he showed us that no matter how obvious the fraud, if you are powerful enough, respected enough, connected enough, you can operate with impunity for decades." Bernie Madoff stole $65 billion. But his real crime was stealing something more precious: trust. In institutions, in regulators, in communities, in people. And that can never be fully recovered. If this story left you outraged, you're not alone. Let us know in the comments. Was the 150-year sentence justice or just theater? And what would you do if you discovered your money was with a new Madoff? And if you want more stories of frauds that destroyed fortunes and exposed systemic failures, subscribe and hit the bell. Because the next story, it's even more disturbing. A billionaire CEO, a $9 billion tech fraud, and a single drop of blood that should never have been tested. Until next time.